Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 5th Annual Raven Foundation Award live video conference. The Raven Award in Arts and Entertainment is given annually to an artist whose work creatively represents the Raven Foundation's mission to use the insights of René Girard to make religion reasonable, violence unthinkable, and peace a possibility. At Raven, we seek to make mimetic theory accessible for everyone, and the Raven Award recognizes an artist who helps fulfill that mission in a unique way. This year, that award goes to someone whom James Williams, editor of the Girardian Reader, calls one of the very best, most creative theologians in the world. Williams goes on to say that he is not only an outstanding theological scholar, point of departure is a critical appreciation of Girard's mimetic theory, but at the same time, an excellent prose writer whose theological frame of reference does not lay a heavy didactic burden on his novelistic work. All of us at Raven agree wholeheartedly with Williams, and to this glowing endorsement, I would like to add that he is a poetic soul whose words illuminate a glimmer of compassion in the midst of a violent world. I have called him a hopetimist extraordinaire because his hope is resilient and contagious. And it is this hope that I believe Dr. Williams is talking about when he notes a point of departure that is a critical appreciation of Girard's mimetic theory. This hope is a faith in the gospel that sees how the seed of love sown in Christ has borne fruit throughout history beyond the borders of the institutional church. And finally, I must add that he is one of the kindest and friendliest people I have ever known. So an especially warm welcome and a hearty congratulations to the man of the hour, Anthony Bartlett. And if people were unmuted, I'm sure you would hear roars of applause and whistles, but you'll just have to imagine them, unfortunately. So congratulations, Tony, and welcome everybody.
Well, just to thank Jim Williams for that glowing endorsement, and thank you. But Jim Williams and I were in the trenches together. We're kind of like locked in, so he's going to say that anyway. You know, we were in the Department of Religion together. We campaigned together.
Awesome. I read more of your writings than Dr. Williams, but Dr. Williams wrote the foreword to I See Satan Fall Like Lightning, which was very helpful to me, learning about mimetic theory and the founding murder. So thank you, Dr. Williams. And I just want to jump right in here and ask you, first of all, can you describe what influenced you to write Pascale's Wager, Tony?
Sure, yeah. Thank you for the question. And once again, thank you for this occasion. And thank you to Raven for bringing me on here, and also for the award, which just arrived today. It was amazing. It weighed 13 pounds. I'll have to describe that later. We don't have time at the moment. But anyway, yeah, what inspired me was, well, first of all, I always wanted to write fiction. I always wanted to try to create a story world that wasn't academic, and to try something else other than academic writing. I've always had that dream. But there were three specific things that kind of goaded me into writing Pascale's Wager, and they all really had a critical impact on actually allowing me and helping me shape the work. Well, the first thing was in Syracuse in the winter, it's very cold. It's extremely cold. It's now, I don't know, it's probably about 10 degrees outside. And coming from a kind of more temperate England, it was a bit of a shock to go through winters here. So I thought, as I was freezing here in my first winters, I thought, I really have to write about this. This is the only way of kind of overcoming the cold, is to write about it. So that was one motivation. The second motivation was, one time I was, and this is a true story, one time I was in DC at, I think it's the Reagan International Airport, and I was traveling on a shuttle, and I was going from one terminal to another, and there was a group of people in the shuttle, and I think I may have been slightly influenced and affected by the fact that it was DC, but they seemed to exude more power and more influence and wealth, really, than I could ever imagine. And I thought, these are people I'm never really going to meet, but I'd like to write about them. So that was the second motivation. And the third motivation was really, it comes from Marie Girard. It covers from, I mean, going through my book, going through Pascale's Wager, you can see that there are kind of Girardian, what you might call themes in there, but I didn't set out to write a kind of Girardian novel in that sense. So let me use this particular Girardian theme and find some story illustration of it. No, that all came kind of naturally, and I knew that if I set out that way, it wouldn't work. What I wanted to write was anthropology, if you excuse the term. Because one thing that Girard points out is that, and he's really the most amazing kind of voice doing this, and he's changed the way we understand so many things. He says that the Bible and the biblical revelation is at least as much about human beings as it is about God. So it's an anthropology in the Bible. And I thought, well, if that's true, if the Bible is about human beings, then presumably you could tell a biblical story without using the Bible. If there's an anthropological model there, if it touches human beings where they live, then you could tell that same story without actually invoking any of the kind of biblical names or traditions, or even that supernatural sense, because it is anthropology. You're talking about human beings. So that was a challenge, and it was kind of an exciting thing, and it really kind of what pushed me most of all to get going on Pascale's Wages was really to write an anthropology as a story.
I think you did an absolutely amazing job with it too. Would you like to give the readers, the audience who may or may not have read your story a little taste of your writing?
Sure, I will do that. Yep. I'd love to do that, and I'm going to give you two little passages here from very early in the story, and they describe the frozen world, the cold world, and then it moves somewhat abruptly. I mean, there's obviously spaces in between. There's narrative in between, but it moves abruptly to the other world, which is part of the huge dynamic of the book. Is these two different worlds which really are bridged by our hero and heroine. Anyway, it goes like this. Night in the homeland, and the world was deserted. Lights from the taps were extinguished. Great domes of the centers were likewise shrouded in darkness. Outside in the lethal cold, the only light was the stars. Thousands of them glittering in the canopy of space. Night was the one true natural beauty of the homeland. Yet it was very rarely appreciated. The razor edge of -60 made sure people gave it the briefest recognition as they glanced through the external ports. For Cal, however, the night held a precious meaning. He had found comfort in it ever since, as a child, her father had paused in the port of the tap, and opening the outside door for a moment, had tilted her head upward. He had told her that every twinkling light she saw was an angel in heaven. When she was in bed, she would try to position her head so she could see a patch of the sky through the skylight. So long as she could hold one of those high, distant beings in view, she would go to sleep comforted. Older now, she sometimes borrowed her father's spare jacket with its extended hood to pull on top of her own. The annihilating air partially blocked, she would exit the tep to look up at the chorus of the stars. Breathing inside the mask of the hood, she drank in the shimmering sky, and for a brief instant she felt at one with her world. Touchdown. Golden light, brilliant and soft, was the first thing that hit Danny and Liz as they gazed stupefied from the shuttle's observation ports. Andy leaned over and unbuckled the seat harnesses, while a lock on the cabin door released and the hatch folded away. Guides gently grasped their charges and helped them to their feet. They took each by the forearm and led them onto a jet bridge moved up to the side of the craft. Take your time, breathe deeply. Don't ask or think all the questions at once. There's plenty of time. So here you are, Danny, Liz, our latest additions to heaven. Welcome.
Thank you, Tony. So that does capture a real contrast between the worlds you made. You mentioned, you just mentioned TEP, and I don't think everybody here knows what TEP or TEP stands for. If you want to just briefly explain that.
It's an acronym. It means the total energy pocket or packet. I can't confuse myself, but it's basically the places where they live. And I chose that acronym. It's their kind of dwelling. It's their home. Everybody lives in a TEP because everything to do with the conservation of energy. And energy is recycled, and it has a way of taking energy from the sun and transmitting it through the body of the outer layer into the dwelling space. But it's very confined, and everything is really in service of maintaining energy. So they all lived in this kind of prison, these prison quarters basically, which are called TEPs.
Great, and that leads us into the next question about. You created such detailed, intricate worlds, both the frozen north and then the next world that was at the end of your reading, the heavenly homeland, and they're linked together. And you must have done a lot of scientific research to create those worlds. Can you tell us how you researched the science behind the worlds you created?
Yeah, basically it was Google.
Okay.
I'm not kidding. I got a lot of that information from Google, but one of the things was refrigeration, because the fiction of the northern homeland is that it's artificially refrigerated, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason to do with the climate. It's maintaining a stable climate. That's the kind of fiction, and I was always fascinated. Since I was a boy, about the creation of cold, of refrigeration, and I kind of actually always wanted to go and find out how that works, and I found out that it works through compressors and fans and refrigeration lines. It's an energy exchange, and what was once warm becomes cold, and what was cold becomes warm. So exchange is at the basis of that. As regards other science, well, later on in the book there's biology, and my wife's she's a nurse practitioner, and I cribbed from her on a lot of that stuff. So that's where I got it. So I'm actually not much of a scientist, but I pretended.
Gotcha. Well, you are you're more of an expert in fields of religion, and that also plays a prominent role in your book. Could you talk a little about the role religion plays in the social structure of the frozen north?
Yeah, well, of course, religion is at the heart of it. I've been around religion since I was a very young child, so I kind of do know about that. I've been in various religious organizations, and in Pascale's wages, there are essentially three types of religion. There is religion as order. And we know, again, from Girard, that's one of the very important functions of religion. Indeed, as he says, humanity arrives simultaneously with religion. There's no gap between the arrival of religion and the arrival of humanity, and it brings order out of chaos. And so religion has this very important role of providing order and structure. But then, of course, as we know in our own history, that sometimes becomes oppressive and can become very oppressive, and order is maintained at the expense of freedom and of truth. So you have that kind of religion. You have a repressive kind of stifling structure of religion. That's one aspect of the book. The other is a kind of religion that breaks free from that, and I don't even know whether you could call it religion, but it's certainly inspired at the same level as religion inspires, but it's kind of it's subversive of that order and even kind of overturn that order, and that is really the third part of the book. That what you might call religion is at work there in that latter part of the book. In the meantime, in the middle, there's religion that is like religion to do with the Greek gods and goddesses. It's a kind of mythic projection. There are the immortals who have the life of Greek gods and goddesses, and it's an incredibly selfish life. It's kind of like a life that we in our worst selfishness we might imagine for ourselves. But it is also very sacrificial in a very underhand way. And it doesn't seem so. It seems very relaxed, but it has a very definite sacrificial structure to it, even more than the more old-fashioned kind of religion you find in the north, in the frozen homeland. So yeah, there's this interplay of the different styles of religion working throughout the book, and it's great fascination to me, even writing it, and then rereading it is how they interplay with each other.
And that was just fascinating to read as you read and get further into the heavenly homeland with its Greek mythological structure. Everyone seems to value freedom. They give it some lip service, but disrupting the orderly disorder of heaven is just unheard of. There is a rigidity of mindset that's in the heavenly homeland that seems eerily similar to the frozen north. They don't want anyone to disrupt the perfection of heaven. They may all pride themselves on their diversity and their tolerance, and there's a very kind of superficial liberalism to them, but really, if you're too disruptive of the perfection of heaven, then you are a troublemaker, just like Paul was in the frozen north. So in a sense, despite their surface differences, these two worlds seem to be mimetic double to me. The frozen north and the heavenly homeland, where they're very different on the surface, but they have something sort of tragic and sacrificial in common. So
that's very true, and as you kind of gave me that question in advance, it really struck me. I hadn't really thought about that, but it's true how what a rigid lifestyle they have. And one of the things I realized is that they have very little technology in heaven. There's more technology, much more technology in the frozen north than there is in the heaven. And it's almost as if they made a decision to exclude technology, and it's something to do, I think, with the fact that they got the world into so much trouble, and especially that class of people who arrive in heaven, who create it for themselves. They realized that the world was kind of wrecked by the way they'd used technology, and so they decided, although it's never made explicit in the book, but they decided somehow or other to have this Greek world, this kind of archaic, imagined Greek world, where there's very little technology, and so there is a kind of rigidity and almost a reactionary character to the life they're living there. It looks backward, and yet at the same time, as you're suggesting, there's a kind of a doubling with the frozen north, and that's very, very much to do with this exchange of cold for heat and heat for cold. That's they're kind of symbiotic. The heaven depends upon the cold of the north to work, and they really they have sacrificed, and they do it all the time. They make this huge gesture of sacrifice for the teppers, as I call them, people who live in the teps in the north. They are permanently sacrificed and kind of abandoned to this very, very rigid life, to a kind of prison existence, in order that they may have their heavenly existence. And so they're kind of locked into that. They're kind of locked into that sacrificial order, and they can't disturb it. It's what keeps them in place. And you know, as you know, if anybody does try to disturb it, as all who becomes Palmiro and Cal becomes Pascale, they do. There's very, very severe sanctions against them, and real hatred. And so yes, it is. I mean, they really haven't. Neither world has escaped at all from a kind of an oppressive form of social order, which is religious in character, is sacrificial in character, and they're in their way they're both locked in. And so when Pascale and Palmiro begin to make some kind of move and some movement for change, then you get that third character of religion, and that's where the hope is. That's where the hope of a kind of new humanity comes around. But you're absolutely right. In the meantime, in their lives, despite the fact that they have this almost infinite freedom in terms of the way they live, their lifestyle, the comforts, the pleasures, the sexuality, the drugs, all that kind of stuff. And I hope I'm not giving too much away here, but anyway, that's what. Even though they have all that, they are still, in many ways, as you say, in a very rigid structure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it takes the arrival of Cal and Paul to point that out to them.
Right.
Seems like they hadn't really thought of it. I have more questions about that, but I see that Suzanne has a very interesting question in the sidebar, and I'll just read it out loud. Suzanne Ross says that they do have a medical technology in heaven that allows them to be immortals, and she wonders if you could talk about the effect that immortality has on the life in heaven. So.
That you're absolutely right, Suzanne. There is that biological technology. I mean, I'm thinking in terms of communication technology. They can, at the end, they find it hard to find a phone. But you're absolutely right. There is that very sophisticated biological biotechnics or genetic technology, and what they've done, they've achieved this dream that people have of reversing or halting the aging process, and they find a way of doing that, and the great hero is the scientist who did that, who was able to do that and find a way of doing it. And I kind of imagined that it was some kind of blocking agent in the. This is totally fictitious biology. By the way, a biologist has actually read the book, and he never complained about the biology, so it must have passed muster to some fashion, to some degree. But anyhow, they figured out some way of blocking the natural process of deterioration and aging in the cell structure. So suddenly, people just become frozen in their bodies at whatever age they were when they begin taking this treatment, and then of course when they recruit the younger people from the frozen north, because they do that to keep the blood stock up, so to speak, they're immediately given this treatment, this cellular treatment, and of course they remain eternally young at the age of 18, 19, 20, something like that. So they have all these fabulous young people wandering around, but they're again they're kind of frozen in time. So time becomes a problem, and I kind of talk about that in the book, about how can you live forever when you're not you haven't really changed your human way of being in time. So that becomes a difficulty for them, and they have to try to recreate. They even try to recreate some of the experiences of being mortal in order to be able to tolerate being, in quotes, immortal. So it's absolutely right. So it's a problem to them, and of course it's a problem to us as well. How do it's very important that we have our time, our restricted time. It makes our life so precious, and when you stretch that out, then it becomes confusing for humanity. And so it's again, it's a technology that could misfire.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It seemed to me that it reduced their, knowing you're going to live forever might reduce your fear and your pain, but then at the same time, it reduces your ability to have compassion and empathize. And the ones who cannot adapt and cannot adjust and find themselves on the outside have perhaps even less hope of being understood and accepted by people whose capacity for empathy is just stunted. So that thought definitely occurred to me as another as a consequence of immortality, and also I think they pride themselves on some degree of intelligence, but they're not trying too hard to get smarter. They're not trying to think too hard. They just want to have fun, and it kind of leaves them unprepared for anything that might happen, because nothing's supposed to happen anyway. So
they are very unprepared.
Yeah. Well, I had another question, and then I think we'll get to more questions from the audience. But as I noticed as I reread the story the second time around, I just noticed that the protagonists, Cal and Paul, spent a lot of time just looking at computer screens, trying to make sense of science in their world. There was a lot of decoding, just a lot of random numbers and symbols that they were decoding. Paul spends a lot of time exploring mathematical patterns, and Cal in particular becomes very good at decoding signs in nature around her, in the sunlight, in visions and dreams. And I saw a real parallel between scientific exploration and the unfolding of a faith journey. And you work in signs and symbols all the time, so I don't think that was an accident. Can you speak more to that?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the presence of codes all throughout the book, in terms of Paul trying to decipher the information on the computers in the northern homeland, and then of course Cal, she's really tuned into her environment, both the kind of the electronic environment, but also nature, as you say. So codes and sign systems are really important, and they eventually they're able to break through, I think, into something different, especially Pascale. But in terms of science, which again is just a matter of a tremendous amount of science is mathematics. In fact, you could say that all science is math. It all has to come. It has to be expressed in terms of numbers to be controlled and to give a predictable result. So in a way, I mean, science is just this huge code book trying to make sense of the universe through numbers, through math. But basically, I think this search that science has, and that it's mirrored in a very different way in Paul and Carl's search, is a search of faith, is a faith journey, and because you may know heard that, what scientists are looking for these days is something called a grand unification theory, where I think it's 4 or 5 fundamental forces of the universe, like gravity and electronic attraction and that kind of stuff. They can integrate. They have those 5 quantum mechanics. Those 5 forces are not integrated. Now, if they should do that, if someone should come up with this huge theory that integrated all those forces, science would head off again on another search. Even that it still wouldn't be satisfying, because essentially, I think science is the same as faith. It's seeking for an answer, or is following it. It has a kind of faith. It believes that there's some kind of answer out there to the human question. It follows it. It seeks in terms of numbers, but it still is a fundamental human search, and you have to have a faith that there is an answer. But it's not going to be these partial answers. Even the grand unification theory, that's not going to quite do it, I don't think. So then faith comes along, the more traditional, should we say, biblical notion of faith. And as Einstein said, science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. So there's this kind of mutual relationship between them. But ultimately, to find this solution, you have to find someone who's prepared to go out in faith, not just simply looking at numbers or codes, but it has to make that big leap of faith. And because ultimately that's a kind of faithfulness. It's a reaching out in the depths of your humanity for something that's going to provide an answer to the human question. And I think Pascale is of course the figure who does that. So I think, yes, the two journeys are very much intertwined. And Adorno, who is the kind of scientist of the miracle of immortality, he is not satisfied with immortality. He goes off on another search, and he wants another form of deification, really. So yeah, there is this sense throughout the book that there's this endless search that's not going to be terminated until we really do find an answer to what it means to be human.
Oh. Wow, that's a never-ending journey, and but one that not everyone makes. It takes a certain kind of courage. Well, I was just going to open us up to questions from everyone else now, and I see 2 more questions after the one we took from Suzanne, and I'm gonna read J.C. Mitchell's question first because it goes with what we're talking about, and then I'll get back to Daniel Mendel's question. So J.C. Mitchell says, since all math is based on the faith of the existence of one point rather than a wave, thus the language of science is based on faith. Is it not exactly like religion? And I'm intrigued by your question, JC, because my father is an atheist mathematician. So that question really intrigues me. But I'll let Tony answer it.
Well, he's just written ha 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 at the bottom there. So are you serious, JC? Well, it's a very philosophical question now, but it's a very valid question. Really, to have science, you have to have 1 point, and actually you have to have 2 points. You have to have a place of separation and difference, and yet identity. In order to have any kind of structure at all, you have to basically 1 + 1 to have some. And so really, whatever universe you're in, you're going to have that kind of point plus point reality, which is a question. Where does that come from? And our brains can't work if you've got that, unless you've got the basis of math 1 + 1. And it is, and we believe in it, as JC is saying. We believe that it's there, and we operate on that basis all the time, that there is identity and difference. and that everything is composed of that. So that's a really important question, and it's a question that goes to the root of our existence as well. And reaching out beyond that, as the scientists do, they say, well, there is this natural structure that I can't do away with, and no one can do away with. So what does it mean, and where does it lead us? And of course, it leads us very onwards on that journey, on the scientific journey. So there is a kind of a parallel shape to science and to faith, and we are on these journeys together. And I think real scientists would say that there is a mystery which they are led forward, they're goaded forward by. Wasn't it Einstein who said? I mean, it sounds very audacious thing to say, but it's typical Einstein. He says, "I want to know the mind of God. I don't want to see how things work. I want to know it from God's point of view. I want to see why He set it up that way and how it's set up. He wants to know the mind of God, which of course really is in the end what we're after."
Yeah. I think searching to know the mind of God could be a dangerous thing, though. But yeah, it struck me as you were explaining that it did strike me the parallels between math and religion, because both have at their very basic level a sense of order and things falling into place.
Right.
And then there's a sense of mystery beyond that for both math and faith. The world of math is basically infinite, and so is the world of faith. So, I want to go on to Daniel Mandel's question now. How does Pascale's wager differ from Pascale's without the E on the end? Gail wants to know this. So.
Hi, Gail. Hi, Dan. Good to know that you're in the conversation here. Well, it's pretty simple, really. I mean, I'm sure you figured it out. I mean, Pascal without the E, the Blaise Pascal, he made this bet that, or he proposed this bet that if a thinking man would be better served by believing, because if there is no God and he dies, he hasn't lost anything. But if he does believe, he will probably live a better life. And if there is a God, then he'll be rewarded if he's acted on the basis that there is a God. So the wage, it's a kind of probability. It's almost a mathematical thing on his part that you bet that there is a God, and you will have a better chance of winning out, being a winner in life than otherwise. If you don't believe in the God, you'll probably be a loser. That's what he's saying. Whereas Pascale with an E, Cal cum Pascal, her wager was not so much that there is a God. That was never a question for her. It was what use was God was a question for her. What God could mean in this world, which was in the frozen world, which was so awful, so empty. What was the point of God? So her question was what was really how to make life work, how not so much to what happens when you die, but what happens when you live, when you're living here on this earth. So her story brings her, I mean, I never actually say it in so many words, but her story brings her to a point where she has to make a wager. You have to bet her life in a way, for the sake of earthly life. And so her wager is not so much to do with God, it's to do with human life, and it's a very big wager that she makes. So it turns the kind of Blaise Pascal's wager thing on its head and says, not, why should we be concerned so much about what happens when we die and if there's a God in the sky kind of thing, but what happens on earth and when we're living now, what are the steps, what's the most the the best way of winning while you're on this earth. So that's her wager.
Right. It strikes me that someone who wants to bet on the idea that there is God just to be rewarded and be among the winners wouldn't recognize a God who would come and be amongst the losers.
Right.
So that's I'm just not going to talk anymore to give away spoilers, so I'll stop. But that struck me as you were explaining the original Pascale's wager.
Yeah.
Adam asks, so what is the mind of God? Do we want to even attempt to try that?
I'll pass on that one.
Okay. But Tony C asks, but how does this faith lead to a transformed way of being human? And I think that's the heart of the book. Seeing that unfold is really the heart of the story, to me. It's a little difficult.
The book ends with a beginning, as people have noticed. I mean, that it doesn't answer that question of a transformed way of being human. It hints at the possibility of it. So, and kind of, I'd like you to read. Anybody who hasn't read it, get a copy and read all the way through to the end, because it's the hint of another possibility. That is the kind of the payoff of the book. It's the big, I hope, coup of the book that is worth reading the whole thing for. But just in parentheses, it also needs a couple of sequels, and eventually I hope to get around to them. So, in answer to your question, Tony, wait for the sequel.
It's hard to wait for the sequel. I mean, you finish the book and you really do just want more. I wonder if we could make a closed forum for people who have read the book where we could discuss it, so that people won't be spoiled by it if it's a closed forum. In this conversation, I've invited, has invited everyone, so we don't want to spoil it. But the book does leave you with so many thoughts and questions, and it's very hard not to talk about all of them right now. But Adam writes, Tony has 3 books: Trinity, Cross Purposes, Virtually Christian, and Pascale's Wager. So if you could talk a little bit about each and tell us how they might connect to each other, how they might fit together.
I could talk a half an hour about that, or an hour, and not pause for breath. I'll try and keep it brief. I mean there are people who write a lot of books, and there are 3. It's a trinity, and it's not a huge amount, but they do have a kind of coherence to them, a sequence. And the first book, Cross Purposes, was a kind of, and of course I'm not the only one to do it, to attempt to deconstruct and to subvert the traditional understanding of atonement in Western Christendom, which has been so powerful and is still so much with us in terms of, well, with the medieval theory it was satisfaction, but people know it much better today as penal substitution, and that has a huge impact on people's minds and their understanding of what Christianity is. So that was a really serious attempt to undermine that viewpoint, and I've joined. I mean, there are many other people who've written in that vein, but Virtually Christian then kind of built on it in terms of trying to create a more a negative or deconstructive, trying to create a positive and constructive understanding of what Christianity means. And I've run around this block a number of times because when you're trying to say something new, of course, it's not all that easy, and you have to lead from something people know to something, and you're not entirely also certain of it yourself. But basically, in the old scheme, which satisfaction and substitution served, was that there is this dual existence, this dual universe. There's Earth here, and then there's heaven up there. This is all bad down here. It's awful, and really God actually doesn't care about it very much. He just wants to get us, in a spiritual sense, up to the heavenly place. And you know, Jesus' death, the cross, is our ticket to that heavenly place. And there's all the notions of violence and God's just vengeance, etc., tied up with that. But if you take that away, then what's left? Do you still have that two-level existence? Do you still have that two-level cosmos? Are we still aiming to get to heaven? Or are we just going to evaporate up there when we die? Or is there something about this earth that is very, very crucial, as I think the Bible would say? If you read the Bible, I think consistently, from the prophets all the way through to the book of Revelation. But if that's the case, that the focus now is on the earth, well, how do you change this earth from what in many ways is a bad place? There's lots of bad stuff happening, and it could get worse. Well, my viewpoint is that it's not by some kind of miracle, and not us getting a fix of doctrine as such. It's about changing our minds. I mean, it's actually changing our heads, changing the way in which we construct our world. And our world is constructed by signs and symbols. And so if we can see how Jesus is actually changing our symbol system, and he's changing it from inside, so we actually now, and of course Gerard is the one who's shown us the crucial aspect of that, is that for these days the figure of the victim in culture and in society is so big and so powerful, and that obviously wasn't the case say 2,000 years ago in Roman and Greek culture, or any other traditional culture in the world. Something must have happened to make that huge change, and Gerard's argument is very persuasive. It's the biblical tradition, it's the gospel. So if there's that change that's happened in terms of revealing the violence, what is the positive change? What is actually being reshaped inside us in terms of where we can actually see love and compassion? We can say what you're talking about, Lindsay, we can see empathy and relationship. And I think those things are happening equally, but maybe not so noticeably as the figure of the victim. So my second book, Virtual Christian, was about trying to show how that was emerging in our world, and the consequences of that in terms of the creation of communities of change around a transformed set of meanings, a transformed set of signs and symbols. And then, of course, Pascale actually tries to create, Pascale's wager tries to create a kind of code, a set of symbols whereby they, oh, that's what it's about. That's what this different kind of anthropology is about. That's what's happening, and it's what the whole biblical enterprise is about. And the world order, which is very dangerous and very destructive, it can change from inside, because human beings can change from inside. They can change symbolically and semiotically, moved by something very deep within the human story, which is the biblical story, which is Jesus as this exceptional human being, etc., etc. So there is that pattern there, from deconstructing a kind of violent atonement to saying how a new atonement will be one of human change, a transformed set of meanings, transformed symbols, to actually creating a symbol or a package of symbols, which is Pascale's wager. We say, well, perhaps that's actually what that's what's happening in the Christian story. Another way of telling the Christian story.
You really tied it all together very well there, and you showed a very clear progression.
Because I wrote it all. That's why. I understand what I wrote.
Yes, but I think you explained it. You summarized it very nicely too for all of us.
As a matter of fact, it's only looking back on your own work that you understand that there is this kind of progression, and that's because the symbol system is working itself. I mean, it's not that I created when I sat down to write cross purposes that I have all this trajectory in mind. The trajectory exists itself. It's the gospel trajectory. You're just trying to be faithful to it.
Mm. And you've illuminated that gospel trajectory through your work to the rest of us, and just given us new eyes to see it all with, and it's beautiful the way you've illuminated it to us. I need to reread Virtually Christian. It's been about 2 years since I've read it. And I got my copy, by the way, at the Theology and Peace Conference of 2012, and I'm very much looking forward to Theology and Peace 2018. I hope everyone here can be there. I intend to get my copy of Pascale's Wager there signed, so I just wanted to throw that out there. That will be at the end of May. But anyway, when I read Virtually Christian, one of the most parts was reading about all the ways the gospel has broken into the world and is showing through modern cinema. And you know, you just analyze movies in Virtually Christian, and that was a lot of fun to read. And Timothy Seitz Brown asks, who will play Pascale in the cinematic virtual sign version of the book? So that's a great question. So
I had in mind who's the oh Lord, she was in the vampire series. Kristen Scott, somebody or other. But anyway, that's just someone like that, you know.
Yeah.
I haven't seen her anything lately, but it's a good question, Timothy. Mm-hmm. You keep the ball rolling.
Yeah. I am sorry that we've lost visual on you, Tony.
I'm trying to. I keep clicking here, trying to get it back. But can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. We'll carry on anyway.
Okay, well, we only have about 5 minutes left. Oh, you did have one more book project that you're working on. You talked about a couple of sequels to Pascale's Wager, but you're also working on something called the Peace Bible. Do you want to tell us any more about that?
Yeah, that's a project that we're working on, really with Would Have Hope, the prayer and study community that I belong to here in Syracuse. It was the idea, actually Heather Scallon's idea. You remember Heather? She's been to a couple of the Theology and Peace, but she wanted to have a Bible which wouldn't scandalize her kids too much, you know, a Bible that she would feel confident sharing with her children. So it's the idea of trying to tell the whole story of the Bible, not leaving stuff out, you know, which has been tried before back in the early centuries, but is to tell the whole story of the Bible, but from the perspective of peace, saying how the whole thing is working toward peace, and try to explain that, well, should we say at a 10th grade reading level, or maybe even lower, and it's illustrated as well, and it should be out, I hope, by the midsummer sometime.
Oh, that's awesome that it should be out that quickly. I mean, I wonder if it would be possible if you would have copies with you at Theology and Peace, but that's a little bit earlier than midsummer. But
I'm optimistic, yeah.
Yeah, but I would be very much interested and excited about that.
I could mention one other thing, Lindsay, if you've got a moment.
Absolutely.
It was the question really of how does the world as depicted in Pascale's Wager, how does it relate actually structurally to our own world? That it's not so far-fetched that there is this duality of really two different kinds of human beings, and of course we know the figures that the discrepancy between the rich and the poor in our world is growing all the time. The divide between the wealth of the very wealthy and the kind of stagnation or the poverty of the rest of the world, and it really is an issue. Oxfam is telling us that by the year 2016, 1% of the world will own over half of the wealth or the property of the world. So there's something like the immortals are already growing. They're already around in our world. But one of the points of Pascale is that these two groups of humanity cannot exist without each other, and the immortals really cannot exist without the Tepers, without the people in the frozen homeland, and that works in terms of the environment, of the climate. It also works in terms of they're the kind of sacrificial group that makes everything in heaven worthwhile. And the proof of that is that every so often they recruit people from the north and show them and introduce them to heaven and make them immortal, so that they will say, wow, isn't this great? Can I have some of it? So they have this kind of perpetual affirmation coming from the desire of the north, shall we say, making the material existence of the immortals worthwhile. There's this sort of hidden secret function of the, shall we say, the poor. And I think that's always the way in the world, that the poor have this enormous, they make the rich rich. You can't have the rich without
Yeah.
in this kind of mythic form, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's very clear how much the rich need the poor to sustain them, and it's not as clear how much the poor need the rich, except it keeps a faint hope alive. The idea of the immortals is it's really just kind of rumors and whispers, but there is just enough of it to provide a sense of hope to keep them going. But other than that, it seems like they don't really need the rich, they don't really need the other world so much. And
well, you know, Lindsay, Hegel says that that actually is I mean, that's what they call the master-slave relationship. That at the end, the master ends up needing the slave more than the slave needs the master, and so there's this mutuality, and you're right. And that's why Marx took Hegel and said, the power lies with the workers. But of course, a project like Pascale says, no, it's not a matter of trying to create a revolution, but a kind of physical or violent revolution, but actually allowing people to see that truth, that profound truth, that really the rich need the poor. And if they could understand that, then they would probably give up trying to be so wealthy, that they would say, oh, I'm slightly embarrassed about the fact that you're not only do you take the material wealth of the poor, but you actually take their desire in order to give yourself some kind of meaning. So that there might be an embarrassment factor there, and certainly an anthropological truth that might eventually kind of turn this increasing divide or separation, turn it around, because it's actually not founded humanly. It doesn't make sense humanly, precisely because of that. The rich need the poor more than the poor need the rich. It's paradoxical, but it's the way our relationships, our human relationships of desire work. And once that becomes well known, then there could be a change. There could be a shift. Say, well, there's no point in being rich if that rich anyway, that enormously wealthy. If I'm actually if I'm humanly secondary to that which I'm trying to at least get away with, and if not destroy.
Well, I hope that becomes more clear in this world, maybe books like yours will help to make that more clear, because we seem to be heading off a cliff in terms of economic disparity and also in terms of ecological troubles, which I'm sure some people can articulate the connection better, but clearly there is a connection between the economic disparities and the ecological problems facing our world today. And
Right.
they both absolutely need healing. Yes, Pascale's wager, I think, speaks to those issues and provides some hope of a way to recognize the problems and begin to heal. But I just hope that the message can be grasped by enough people in power. And I guess there's something to be said about all of us having some power within us, especially since the 99% are the real people with some small degree of power, and the 1% really does need us. But it's just very hard to think of actually making a difference when we feel so small. And I think Pascale's wager speaks to that too. So this has been so much fun. I just love listening to you talk about your writing. I love your mind, Tony. I think I speak for everyone at Raven that we are so fortunate to have a mind like yours gifting us with wonderful books, and really your Facebook posts every day are little poems in themselves that I think everybody enjoys. So we really appreciate you being on with us. So I want to thank you so much for being here tonight, and thank everybody who came and participated in this chat. Thank you so much to everybody for being here.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you, Raven, once again. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Adam, and thank you everyone else who's here. It's been a lot of fun, and blessings to everyone.